Anzio, Italy, January 24th, 1944. 5 American soldiers entered Emperor Nero's ancient tunnels on a routine patrol. Their dog tags were found melted together into a grotesque, smoking lump. Yet there was no fire, no blood, and no bodies. From the depths of my collection, the War Maestro brings you a tale where documented military history bleeds into realms where no weapon can protect you, and no tactical training prepares you for what waits in the dark. The Anzio beachhead, January 1944. Operation Shingle had stalled. What was planned as a swift flanking maneuver to bypass the Gustav Line and strike at Rome had devolved into a brutal war of attrition. American and British forces found themselves pinned against the coast, surrounded on 3 sides by German artillery positioned in the Alban Hills. The 3rd Infantry Division, the Rock of the Marne, held the eastern flank, mere miles from ancient ruins that had witnessed centuries of bloodshed. Captain Robert Hargrove of Baker Company studied the tactical map in the command tent, the canvas wall shuddering with each distant artillery impact. Intelligence had reported unusual German movements near a network of caves once used by Emperor Nero. Local Italians called it La Bocca dell'Inferno, the mouth of hell. Take your squad, Sergeant Willis. 5 men, light gear. Observe and report only, Hargrove ordered, his voice steady despite 4 sleepless nights. These ruins might provide the Germans cover for a counterattack. Sergeant James Willis nodded, selecting 4 of his best men: Corporal Mitchell, an experienced scout; Private First Class Rodriguez, their radio man; Private Dennings, a former archaeology student who might make sense of the ruins; and Private Cooper, a farm boy from Nebraska with uncanny night vision. At 2200 hours, under a moonless sky, the patrol moved out. Their orders were simple: a 4-hour reconnaissance mission. They would radio hourly situation reports, maintain stealth, and avoid engagement. The last photograph taken of the 5 men shows them checking equipment by lamplight. Willis adjusting his Thompson submachine gun, Mitchell consulting his map, Rodriguez testing the radio, Dennings examining a small guidebook on Roman architecture, and Cooper cleaning his M1 Garand rifle with practiced precision. At 2300 hours, the first radio check came through clearly. Baker 6, this is Pathfinder. Perimeter secured, advancing toward objective. No enemy contact. Over. At midnight, the second transmission arrived with noticeable static. Baker 6, Pathfinder. We've reached the ruins. Something strange about these caves. Local inscriptions don't match known Roman patterns. Request permission to investigate further. Over. Captain Hargrove granted limited permission. Proceed with caution. Priority remains enemy position identification. Out. The 3rd transmission at 0100 hours would become the center of a military investigation that remains classified to this day. Baker 6, we have movement, strange lights, requesting confirmation. Over. Then, nothing but static. When dawn broke, a second patrol would discover what remained of Willis and his men. Everything except the men themselves. The silence from Willis's squad triggered immediate concern. Captain Hargrove dispatched Lieutenant Thomas Merrick with 8 men at first light. As dawn broke over the Anzio beachhead, casting long shadows across shell-pocked terrain, Merrick's team moved cautiously through morning mist toward the ruins. Something ain't right about this place, Corporal Jenkins whispered as they approached the cave entrance. Ancient Roman pillars, partially collapsed, framed a gaping maw in the hillside. Moss-covered stone bore inscriptions that predated Rome itself, symbols that seemed to writhe in the corner of one's vision. Lieutenant Merrick, a former police detective from Boston, maintained a professional demeanor. Standard search formation. Jenkins and Davis secure the entrance. Everyone else, weapons ready. They discovered the abandoned camp just inside. 5 packs arranged in military precision. 5 rifles stacked neatly against the wall. Cleaning kits laid out nearby. Ration tins unopened. Canteens full. Maps spread out on a flat rock, weighed down with stones, as if they'd just stepped away momentarily. "Radio's here, sir," Private Kelly called, lifting Rodriguez's equipment. "Seems functional. No damage." Merrick frowned, examining the scene. 20 years of military service had taught him to read battlefields like books. No signs of struggle, no blood, no shell casings. If they were ambushed, they didn't get a single shot off. The lieutenant's flashlight beam swept deeper into the cave, revealing ancient frescoes depicting scenes unnervingly similar to warfare, yet wrong somehow. Figures in armor facing opponents too elongated, too strange in proportion. "Sir," Davis's voice echoed from deeper within. "You need to see this." In a small chamber, roughly circular and seemingly carved by tools rather than nature, Davis stood rigid, his light fixed on a small metal object in the center of the room. Merrick approached slowly, the hair on his arms rising before he even recognized what he was seeing. 5 sets of dog tags: Willis, Mitchell, Rodriguez, Dennings, Cooper, but not separated, fused together into a single, twisted lump of metal. Not cut or smashed, but melted, the way metal liquefies in a foundry. "That's impossible," Merrick whispered, crouching to examine it without touching. It would take temperatures over 2,500 degrees to melt steel like this. Nothing here is burnt, not even scorch marks on the stone. That's when they noticed the markings. Fresh scratches in the ancient stone walls. 5 distinct sets, not random. Patterns, symbols. The same symbols repeated again and again, eerily similar to the ancient inscriptions outside, but clearly carved recently with military-issue combat knives. Behind them, the radio they'd brought crackled suddenly to life with Rodriguez's voice, impossibly clear. "We shouldn't have opened the passage. God help us. They're still here. They've always been." The transmission cut to static, as the ground beneath their feet trembled slightly, dust sifting down from the ceiling. Lieutenant Merrick made a decision that would haunt him for decades. "We're leaving. Now fall back to HQ." His report would use the term unexplained combat attrition, never mentioning the dog tags or the voice on the radio. Some truths weren't meant for official records. February 1944. The Allied command post buzzed with activity as the Anzio campaign continued. In a secluded corner of the intelligence tent, Major William Harding reviewed Lieutenant Merrick's report for the 3rd time, cigarette ash building precariously on his desk. "You understand this can't go into the official channels," Major Harding said, his voice low as he slid the folder into a red striped envelope. 5 men don't just vanish. It's bad for morale. Lieutenant Merrick stared at his trembling hands. 3 weeks had passed since the incident, and he hadn't slept through a night since. "Sir, something happened in those caves. Something that needs—" "What it needs is to be classified," Harding interrupted, stamping the envelope with eyes only, in harsh red letters. "We're fighting Nazis, not ghosts, Lieutenant." But even the military bureaucracy couldn't fully bury what happened. Statements were taken, then redacted. Photographs were developed, then locked away. The twisted lump of dog tags was sent to a military laboratory in Maryland, where 3 technicians reportedly requested transfers after examining it. Private First Class Thomas Davis, who had found the dog tags, began experiencing severe migraines and nosebleeds. Military doctors diagnosed combat fatigue, but Davis knew better. I hear them at night, he confided to the chaplain, scratching at the walls, whispering in Latin, but not quite Latin. 3 days later, Davis was evacuated to a hospital in Naples with a medical designation that guaranteed he'd never see combat again. The cave entrance was discreetly sealed by combat engineers. The official reason: unstable geological conditions. Explosive charges collapsed the main entrance, burying whatever secrets lay inside beneath tons of ancient stone. A strange mist hung over the site for days afterward, refusing to dissipate even under the Italian sun. Captain Robert Hargrove, who had ordered the ill-fated patrol, requested access to the full investigation. His request was denied. 3 nights later, an artillery observer reported seeing 5 figures in American uniforms walking toward the German lines. A patrol was dispatched at dawn, but found only a series of footprints that stopped abruptly in soft mud, as if the men had simply vanished mid-stride. In Washington, D.C., a classified addendum was added to the Anzio operational reports, creating a new category: Unexplained Combat Attrition. The addendum noted similar incidents throughout military history: a British patrol in the Somme in 1916, a German unit in the Ardennes in 1914, Roman legionnaires near Hadrian's Wall in 122 AD. The pattern was always the same: men vanishing without trace, strange markings left behind, and in some cases inexplicable metal deformations. The report concluded with a chilling observation: proximity to ancient religious sites appears to be a common factor in 73% of cases. The document was sealed, access restricted to those with ultra-clearance, and filed away in archives that would remain untouched for decades. The war continued. Men fought, died, and were counted, except for 5 who were simply listed as missing in action. But in Anzio, locals began telling stories about American voices calling from the sealed ruins at night. April 1972. Pentagon Archives, Sublevel 3. Dr. Eleanor Collins, military historian with specialized clearance, sat alone amid towering shelves of forgotten operations. Her research on unconventional warfare had led her down a rabbit hole of redacted reports and sealed testimonies. The Anzio file lay open before her, the yellowed pages smelling of dust and official secrets. What had begun as research into tactical failures had evolved into something else entirely when she discovered the pattern: clusters of unexplained disappearances at specific archaeological sites across multiple conflicts. "This makes no sense," she whispered, spreading photographs across her desk. The black and white images showed the fused dog tags from multiple angles. A handwritten note from a metallurgist reported, "Material exhibits molecular restructuring inconsistent with known thermal processes. Radiation testing inconclusive." Eleanor flipped through witness statements, most heavily redacted. Lieutenant Merrick's psychological evaluation from 1946 caught her attention. The man had suffered recurring nightmares until his death in 1958. His therapist's notes described him waking, screaming the same phrase. "They're still inside them." A small tape recorder sat beside her notepad. She pressed play, listening again to the recently declassified oral history from Corporal Jenkins. Recorded in 1967, "Wasn't just the dog tags that bothered me. It was the walls. Those scratches weren't random. They were organized, like someone trying desperately to communicate. Some looked fresh, others seemed to be healing. Yes, healing, like the stone was alive somehow. And the air inside that chamber, it felt charged, like right before lightning strikes. My watch stopped at exactly 0100 hours and never worked again. When we left, I could swear I heard footsteps following us. But every time I turned around, nothing was there. Just shadows that seemed a little too deep, a little too aware." Eleanor rubbed her temples, fighting a growing headache. The file contained a follow-up report from 1953, detailing a bizarre incident near Anzio. A local farmer had discovered a disoriented American soldier wandering his field, wearing tattered U.S. Army fatigues from World War II. The man appeared severely malnourished, with strange burn-like patterns across his skin. Most disturbing was the medical examination. Subject exhibits extreme muscle atrophy inconsistent with 9-year survival without nutrition. Carbon dating of uniform fabric indicates expected degradation, while subjects' dog tags are absent. Subjects' limited vocalizations include repeated phrases in archaic Latin. Brain activity scans show abnormal patterns in the temporal lobe. The man had never been identified. His fingerprints matched no military records. His blood type changed 3 times during his hospital stay, something the doctors could not explain. He died exactly 9 days after being found, his last coherent words documented as, "They're wearing us now." Eleanor closed the file, suddenly aware of how silent the archive had become. The fluorescent lights above her flickered once, twice. In the momentary darkness, she could have sworn she saw footprints forming in the dust of the concrete floor, leading away from the Anzio file and deeper into the archives. What Eleanor didn't notice was that her own watch had stopped at precisely 0100 hours. Anzio countryside, June 1953. The Italian summer painted the fields gold, erasing visible scars of a war nearly a decade past. Farmers tilled soil once churned by tank treads. Children played in meadows where men had fallen. Nature's merciful amnesia at work. Gianni Mazzolo, a weathered vineyard owner, had lived through both world wars. He could still point to where American artillery had positioned, where German snipers had nested. War had embedded itself in his mental geography. That morning began like any other. Gianni rose before dawn to check his vines. The first oddity was the mist, unnaturally thick and localized, hovering above the ancient stone path that led toward the sealed ruins locals now avoided. "Madonna mia," he whispered, crossing himself as he squinted into the unnatural fog. A figure emerged, walking with a peculiar disjointed gait. A man in tattered olive drab, an American uniform now sun-bleached and deteriorated. His movements were wrong, jerky, as if his joints bent in unnatural directions. His skin hung loose on a frame that had lost too much mass too quickly. Gianni approached cautiously, calling out in broken English learned from American soldiers. The man's head snapped up with mechanical precision. His eyes, when they caught the light, reflected back wrong. Too dark. Too deep. "Aiutami," the figure said in perfect Italian, then switched to English. "Help me. I got separated from my unit." Gianni later told authorities the man's voice sounded like multiple voices layered together, as if several people were speaking in precise unison. When asked for identification, the soldier had looked confused, running skeletal fingers across his chest where dog tags should have hung. "They took them," he said. "Had to leave them behind to get out." Across the man's exposed skin, bizarre patterns formed. Not tattoos, but something like burn scars arranged in geometric designs that seemed to shift when viewed peripherally. The patterns matched symbols carved into nearby ruins that predated even Roman occupation. When Gianni brought water, the soldier drank gallons without stopping, his throat moving in unnatural undulations. When questioned about his unit, he gave accurate details about the 3rd Infantry Division at Anzio, information only a participant would know. "Cooper," he finally said when asked his name. "Private Adam Cooper, Nebraska." But his accent wasn't American. It carried cadences of something older, something that had never known human speech. Military authorities arrived within hours. As they approached, Cooper became agitated, pointing repeatedly toward the ruins. "The others are still there," he insisted. "Not dead, not alive, just there. They found a way in. The old way. The way that was always there. Cooper's skin seemed to ripple under the sunlight, the strange markings pulsing like circuitry. When the military doctor tried to take a blood sample, the needle bent upon contact with Cooper's skin. As they loaded him into the ambulance, Cooper grabbed Gianni's wrist with surprising strength. The old Italian would later describe the soldier's touch as cold, not like a corpse, but cold, like the space between stars. Cooper whispered 5 words that Gianni would repeat to military investigators, to priests, and finally to Dr. Eleanor Collins, 19 years later. We opened what was always closed. Naval Support Hospital, Naples, June 1953. A specialized ward had been hastily converted for a single patient. Military police stood guard outside. Inside, behind reinforced glass, medical personnel observed the man who called himself Private Cooper. Captain Eliza Wright, military psychiatrist, maintained meticulous notes. 20 years of service had not prepared her for this case. Day 3. Subject's physical condition defies explanation, she recorded. Weight fluctuates by up to 30 pounds within hours. Burn-like markings continue to shift position. Temperature remains at 92.3 degrees, regardless of environmental conditions. Subject refuses to sleep, stating, "They come when I close my eyes." The security footage captured Cooper's disturbing behavior. At precisely 0100 hours each night, he would stand at attention, facing the eastern wall, the direction of Anzio, and begin scratching at his skin, producing the same symbols found in the ruins. The wounds would heal within minutes, leaving new pattern variations. Day 5. Blood work inconclusive. Sample appears normal under initial testing, but degrades into unidentifiable components within 17 minutes of collection. Subject demonstrated knowledge of classified military operations from 1944, providing verifiable details only accessible to command-level personnel. Behind the glass, nurses whispered. Cooper would sometimes speak in perfect synchronicity with them, mouthing their words as they spoke them, as if he knew their thoughts seconds before they formed. Several staff requested transfers. During the daily examinations, Cooper would recite the names of his lost patrol, Willis, Mitchell, Rodriguez, Dennings, in an endless loop, each repetition in a slightly different voice. When asked directly about the cave, he would only say, "There were spaces between the walls, spaces where something waited, always waited." Day 7. Subject's mental state deteriorating, periods of lucidity interspersed with trance-like states during which he speaks in what linguistics experts identify as Proto-Italic, a theoretical precursor to Latin dating to approximately 1000 BCE. Expert analysis of phonology suggests native-level fluency. The room's electronic equipment malfunctioned in Cooper's presence. Recordings of his voice contained inexplicable secondary tracks, whispers beneath whispers. X-rays showed impossible skeletal anomalies that shifted between exposures. His shadow sometimes moved independently of his body, visible only in peripheral vision. Day 9. Subject predicted a minor earthquake at 0024 hours. Event occurred exactly as described. When questioned about this foreknowledge, subject stated, "The earth remembers what's buried in it. The walls are thin today. They're coming through." That night, Cooper's condition rapidly deteriorated. His temperature plummeted to 78 degrees. The markings on his skin began to glow with a faint bioluminescence. He started speaking rapidly in multiple voices simultaneously, recognizable as Willis, Mitchell, Rodriguez, and Dennings, having conversations with himself in different military jargons. At precisely 0100 hours, all power to the facility failed. Emergency generators activated after 43 seconds of darkness. When light returned, the medical staff found Cooper in perfect parade rest position, facing east. His eyes were open, pupils fully dilated. Captain Wright's final entry read simply, "Subject deceased at 0102. Cause undetermined." Final words, spoken in English, "We're still on patrol." The autopsy revealed the most disturbing detail of all. Cooper's dog tags were discovered inside his stomach, fused together with 4 other sets of tags in a familiar, impossible configuration. Anzio, Italy, present day. The mid-morning sun cast long shadows across the archaeological excavation. Yellow caution tape fluttered in the coastal breeze. What began as a routine historical preservation project had become something else entirely when workers uncovered a collapsed tunnel entrance bearing U.S. Army Corps of Engineers markings from 1944. Dr. Michael Dennings, a military historian specializing in the Italian campaign, stood at the edge of the dig site. His grandfather's brother had disappeared here, a family mystery that had driven his career choice. After decades of bureaucratic resistance, he had finally secured permission to investigate the sealed cave system. "We've cleared about 20 meters of the original tunnel," the Italian archaeologist explained, leading Michael toward the entrance. "We found these embedded in the collapsed section." In her gloved hand lay fragments of rotted canvas and leather, unmistakably pieces of World War II American field gear. Carbon dating confirmed they were from the 1940s. "There's something else," she said hesitantly. "Something we cannot explain." The excavation had revealed a second, previously unknown chamber beneath the main cave system. The walls were covered in 2 distinct layers of markings, ancient symbols that predated Roman occupation, and precisely the same symbols carved with military-issue K-bar knives, the tool marks still visible after decades. "They match," Michael whispered, comparing photographs. "Exactly match. How could they know to replicate symbols they'd never seen?" As they descended into the newly opened chamber, Michael's EMF meter spiked violently. Temperature sensors showed a sudden 10-degree drop. The air felt charged, like the moment before lightning strikes. "Here," the archaeologist said, directing her light to the chamber's center. The ground contained an irregular depression approximately 2 meters in diameter, the stone worn smooth, as if subjected to extreme heat. Around this depression, 5 distinct sets of boot prints were preserved in the mineralized dust, military tread patterns matching 1940s issue combat boots. The prints led toward the depression, never away. Michael knelt, examining the scene. They were standing in formation, he realized, facing inward, not random, deliberate. His metal detector whined softly near the depression's center. Careful excavation revealed a small object buried just beneath the surface, a U.S. Army Signal Corps field radio frequency crystal. Standard issue for 1944 radio sets, but altered. Microscopic examination would later show impossible precision cuts in the quartz, creating a lattice pattern identical to the wall symbols. "My God," Michael whispered, sudden understanding dawning. They weren't trying to document the symbols. They were trying to warn about them. In his research, Michael had discovered Lieutenant Merrick's personal journal, containing one crucial detail omitted from official reports. Before entering the caves, Private Dennings, the archaeology student, had translated fragmentary inscriptions near the entrance. "Those who speak with the stones may walk between worlds, but the door swings both ways." As Michael photographed the depression, his camera failed. All 5 lights they'd brought flickered simultaneously. In that moment of darkness, he felt a subtle shift in the air pressure, as if the chamber had taken a breath. When the lights returned, nothing had visibly changed, yet each person there would later describe the same unsettling sensation. They were no longer alone. In the disturbed dust of the depression, 5 new boot prints had appeared, facing outward. The military sealed the site again the next day. Official reason: unexploded ordnance risk. But local residents report that on certain nights, particularly during NATO exercises when radio traffic is heavy, 5 soldiers in vintage American uniforms can be seen walking the quiet roads near Anzio, moving with strange, synchronized precision, as if guided by something only they can hear. They never speak, they never leave footprints, and they always vanish before dawn. If this declassified file from the War Maestro's archive has left you checking the shadows, make sure you're prepared for the next mission. Subscribe now and secure your position in our unit. We have countless more sealed records waiting to be opened. Activate your notification bell. Consider it your personal radio channel for when new horrors emerge from the archives. Share this briefing with fellow enthusiasts who understand that sometimes the most terrifying enemies aren't the ones in the crosshairs. Check your dog tags. Are they unusually warm to the touch? Perhaps you should mention it in the comments below. Remember, the 5 missing soldiers of Anzio are still on patrol, and somewhere in the dark, they're searching for others to join their eternal mission.